Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Justin O'Donnell, and this is Justin's Galactic Science Fiction and Entertainment Talk Show. And tonight we have a very special guest, Robert J. Sawyer. He is the Dean of Canadian Science Fiction. He is an award-winning science fiction author. He has written well over, 24 novels?
23.
43. I stand corrected. One of them, Flash Forward, even became the basis for an ABC television series.
That's absolutely right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a little later, Robert's going to talk about his new project, but tonight's focus is going to be on how one goes from being a sci-fi fan to a sci-fi pro, which I thought was a very interesting topic that Robert suggested, and I'm looking forward to exploring that with him tonight. So, first of all, thank you for being with us, Robert.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to get to know you a little bit. Let's talk about how did you get involved in science fiction to begin with? Was it did you have some kind of a great epiphany moment or?
So I'm 55 years old. So I'm not young, but I'm part of the first generation of professional science fiction writers who really came into it through film and television rather than through books. I'm going to pan a little bit here, and you can see some of the things that are behind my desk here. There's the USS Enterprise, Fireball XL5 in the foreground right here. That's the Lawgiver from Planet of the Apes. And over here in the back, that's a Martian war machine from George Pal's movie version of War of the Worlds. So I was born in 1960. Star Trek debuted in 66. I saw my first episode actually when I was 7 in 67. Devil in the Dark, the one with the Horta.
Oh, yes.
I had been watching Fireball XL5. It came on when I was 3 years old. And I was also growing up in that decade that was the space race. You know, the decade when Kennedy said, put a man on the moon before the end of the decade, he was talking about my first decade of life. So it was the combination of real life space travel and really good science fiction on TV, and 2001: A Space Odyssey, Planet of the Apes in the theaters when I was 8 years old. That's what made me a lifelong science fiction fan.
So I guess you could say that you kind of walked into a perfect storm scenario with regards to science fiction in the 60s.
I think so. And I had parents who were both academics. They both taught at the University of Toronto, and they both very much wanted to encourage reading amongst their boys. They had 3 sons. And so my dad had seen, okay, he likes this Star Trek thing, and he likes Fireball XL5. He went off when I was heading off to summer camp and to the local bookstore, and he knew nothing about science fiction, but he wanted to get me something that I would read because he wanted to encourage that. He saw there on the shelf a name he knew, Isaac Asimov. He knew it from Asimov's Guide to Science, Asimov's Guide to Shakespeare. He knew it from the nonfiction. Didn't know him as a science fiction writer, but okay, there's a collection of Asimov's stories about robots. And then there was also a novel by a guy named David Gerrold. Well, who's David Gerrold? Oh, he had just written an episode of Star Trek. He wrote Trouble with Tribbles. Okay. So my first 2 science fiction books, adult books, were chosen by my dad and happened to be these wonderful, wonderful stories that hooked me for life. I'm delighted that in the course of my life, I got to meet and interview Isaac Asimov for the CBC, and I've become friends with David Gerrold. David and I edited a book 10 years ago for the 40th anniversary of Star Trek called
That is incredible, yeah.
Yeah, so, to grow up to become buddies with these guys, in the case of David Gerrold and many of the other writers that...
Yeah, you're literary heroes.
It's amazing. It's such a welcoming, warm community to be part of. I am so, in the best atheistic sense, blessed to be part of this really, really warm community.
Okay. Now, let's talk a little bit about the community, because I know there's much more to you than being an author. You've been involved in the science fiction community in a variety of capacities over the years. Could you maybe just explain to everyone some of what you've done?
Sure. I actually founded with a friend my high school science fiction club. My high school didn't have one. I was 15. My friend Rick Gottlieb and I decided to found this organization, and it's been a wonderful part of my social life. I met my wife in that organization.
All right.
We just celebrated in October. We had a party here in my home for the 40th anniversary reunion of that club. And astonishingly, we had about 25 people show up who had been in that club 40 years ago. That's the power of, I think, any element of science fiction fandom. You found your peeps. You found your tribe when you found science fiction fandom, and they become a part of you for life. It's terrific.
Okay, so it's interesting you refer to science fiction as being kind of a tribe, because I guess it does attract all kinds of individuals from all walks of life, people who you wouldn't normally meet or associate with outside of the science fiction community.
The one thing that science fiction fans have in common is they're bright. They're intellectuals. They're curious about science. They're curious about our place in the universe. That's what drew them to the genre in the first place. So you'll find that the whole gamut of political beliefs, left to right, all sorts of other interests as well, but they're always very bright people, well-read, and good conversationalists. And, the media has this way of portraying science fiction fans as geeks.
Oh, I know.
But, they are the most interesting, most engaging, most thoughtful people on the planet. I'm lucky enough to have them as my family, my friends, and to make a living catering to a fraction of them, in those particular ones who happen to like my books. I couldn't ask for a more appreciative audience or a better community to be a member of.
Yeah, I agree. Having been a member of the sci-fi community for about, I would say 25 years myself. I mean, that's you meet some of the most interesting people, and you wouldn't meet these kinds of people in other venues necessarily, and it's just incredible a lot of the interests they have. And you are right. Yeah, a lot of these people, contrary to the stereotype that we're just hopeless geeks who just memorize minutia about various episodes of Star Trek and other shows.
Although I have done that.
I've done that too. But it goes much deeper than that. And speaking of conventions, you were telling me that one of the things you had done, you had helped organize or chair some conferences. If you could maybe talk a little bit about that.
When I was a teenager, between 1975, when I was 15, and 1982, when I was 22, I was involved in running 4 small conventions in Toronto. They're still fondly remembered. People still talk about them, which is nice. And I was the moderator, was the term we used, for the Ontario Science Fiction Club, which was the oldest and largest science fiction fan group in Ontario, Canada at that time. I was moderator for a year. And so I was actively involved with this stuff. And it still is such an important part of my social life. I'm off to a convention in Boston next month. Boston next month, Rye-Brook, New York, which is just outside New York City. One weekend in March, the following weekend, Seattle, Washington. Coming back in April for Toronto's big convention at Astra. This is what I do. This is where I go. It's, Hemingway's phrase, a movable feast or a floating party. Every weekend I can show up at the right city in North America and find my people, and it's fabulous.
Yeah, it is interesting how it is just really an extended community, and it's not just confined to say Toronto or Canada or even North America for that matter. I mean, you can there are conventions going on internationally, like in the UK, in Europe, even in
Sure.
South America.
Absolutely, I've been guest of honor at conventions in Japan, in China, in Spain, in Italy. I lose track. Been over to Hungary for a science fiction event. It's all over the world. It's all over the world. Are you moved? I'm still here. I'm.
Yeah, are you? Yeah, we're kind of losing you there. It's a.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, you're getting back to normal now. So
people ever hope for.
Okay, okay. Yeah. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the concept of the sci-fi fan versus the sci-fi pro. Now, I guess first of all, to get this discussion going, could you really give a definition of the two?
You said in the introduction that you're going to talk about the journey from one to another. It isn't a journey. You always are a science fiction fan. You start as a fan. You're a fan for life. You're a fan for life.
Okay.
And you might also find a way to make a living, but that's on top of. That's the cherry on top of the ice cream sundae that is fandom. A fan is simply somebody for whom it's an avocation. They're an aficionado. There's somebody who reads science fiction, or perhaps watches science fiction film or TV, or is in some sort of ancillary way involved with it. There are a lot of people, for instance, who make reproductions of props and do model kit building. There are a lot of people who do costuming, cosplay, it's called, where they'll make mass-grade costumes based on science fiction. Lots of people who do wonderful art. I've got some great science fiction art on my walls right there. That happens to be professional stuff. Tom Kidd did that. That's cover of one of my books. But elsewhere in my apartment, I have lots of art done by amateur science fiction artists. There are a million different ways to express your fondness for this genre, this literature, and every single one of them is valid.
Okay. Maybe you could let's talk a little bit about say like I'm your average sci-fi fan. I'm off the street and I have a yearning to become a pro, to somehow make science fiction my vocation, my career. Like what first of all, like what avenue? Well, you've touched a little bit about how there's model building and costuming and stuff. What other areas or opportunities are there? Are there? Would you say the traditional routes to take in this field, or is it really depending so much on? Does it depend on your creativity in terms of creating something
who make a living from science
niche for
fiction
yourself?
Are doing it out of their creativity. They're either writers like myself, editors. Sadly, just yesterday we buried my previous editor, David Hartwell, who just passed away, one of the greats in the industry. We're all sorry.
I'm sorry.
But he was a lifelong science fiction fan. He lived a life and was also. But there are artists, Tom Kidd, whose work I pointed out up there on the wall, who make a living doing it. All kinds of people. But the only one I can really speak to from experience is making your living as a writer. And science fiction has always been welcoming of new voices. It loves new voices. We have the John W. Campbell Award for Best New Writer. We have the Compton Cook Memorial Award for Best First Novel. We have the Philip K. Dick Award for books that were published only in paperback, which tends to be the beginning of a writer's career. We do all sorts of things to celebrate and encourage in this genre. And most Americans, I don't know if most Canadians would say this, but most Americans would say the number one science fiction writer of all time was Robert A. Heinlein. And Heinlein famously said, there's no way you can pay back those who've been kind to you as you move up in a profession. You can only pay forward, turn around, give that helping hand to somebody else behind you. I benefited enormously from other writers, more established writers, at the beginning of my career. And I like to think that a few of the guys who are names today are names today because I helped them out 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago.
Okay, so you help them out. Like, what do you do exactly? Like, do you mentor them? Do you do like, say, ghostwriting or script doctoring, or do you help them in other ways?
Somebody, you would never. Here, let me show you how that's done and rewrite it. But absolutely, over the years, I have taught science fiction writing at the University of Toronto, at Humber College, Ryerson University, the Banff Centre for the Arts. And none of that pays worth a damn. You do it as paying forward, believe me. And also done some individuals that I've mentored. Right now, I mentor a Cree writer, an Indigenous Canadian, what Americans might refer to as an Indian. And she's a wonderful female hard science fiction writer who happens to also be Cree. And the opportunity to help what is traditionally a marginalized voice in every aspect of Canadian culture, our Indigenous peoples, and to find one who has embraced hard science fiction was like, oh my God, how could I not do whatever I could to help this particular voice find an audience? Her name is Shayla Elizabeth, and she's just an absolutely terrific writer, and I'm, of course, proud and happy to be helping her.
Great. Okay. No, I mean that's wonderful that you have these opportunities to go and to help shape and mold future writers in the field of science fiction.
Yes.
And
and people did that for me. I was very much mentored by a writer in Toronto named Terrence M. Green, just like the color, Green, Terry Green, who, for no good reason other than the goodness of his heart, read my manuscripts when I was in my 20s and told me how bad they were, which is what you need to hear. You don't need to hear what your mother or your high school English teacher is going to tell you. You need somebody who's selling to say, here's your dream. You want to be here, and here's the reality. This is where you are, and it's going to take some effort on your part. But I'm here to be your coach, your mentor, your cheerleader, all those things, if you're willing to do the work. And I benefited from that, and I'd like to think I've turned around and done that for several writers. Every year, I am so proud about Canada's Science Fiction Award, the Aurora Award, of which I've been lucky enough to win more than anybody else in history. I'm very proud of that. But the Aurora has often gone to my writing students in the last decade, and nothing makes me happier than to see one of the people I've given a hand to having this bit of luck.
That is amazing. I mean, that has got to feel.
It does. It's very gratifying, incredible. Very satisfying.
Okay, we've got a question up here. We've got from a gentleman named Pablo. Can you show us an example of how is the process to create science fiction?
So I can tell you what works for me. I am a thematic writer, and I'm a research-driven writer. So for me, it's a top-down approach. I'm going to see if we can. I should be able to walk and talk with this, right? This is an iPhone. So I'm walking over here, and I'm going to show you.
You're doing a great job.
For instance, some of the research that I've done for my most recent novel about to come out. It's a book called Quantum Night. And this shelf along here is various research works that I read specifically for that book, and so is most of the stuff down here. I spent the better part of a year doing nothing but research, trying to figure out what it was that I wanted to say. I was going to write a book about the nature of human evil, why there is such a thing, and no supernatural element to it, no dark side of the force, why it is that evolutionarily or psychologically people do lousy things to other people. And I spent a year with no agenda other than wanting to understand that. And out of that started to emerge the characters and what I wanted to say. So it's always research, research, research. Science fiction. It's right there in the name, science. You have to dig in. In the case of the most recent book, a lot of psychology, which is certainly a science. And you find gems as you're going along. You find things that you don't know you're looking for. Those people who try to write science fiction by saying, okay, I'm going to write the story, and then, I'm going to go to Wikipedia and quickly check a fact. You're missing the gold mine. The gold mine is in the intensive research. This is the way I do it. It's the way my friend Robert Charles Wilson does it, another very fine Canadian science fiction writer. And that's what I suggest to you, Pablo. Pick a topic. I don't care what it is. I picked the nature of evil for my most recent book, but the book before that was whether or not there might be fossils on Mars. And just dig into it and ask yourself with every fact you discover, is there a way to make this dramatic? Is there a way to write a scene that hinges on this revelation? And out of that, you build your story. You build it top down. The characters come from the research. The conflict comes from the research. And ultimately, the theme, what you decide ultimately you want to share and say to the world, comes from the research.
Okay, you talked a little bit about what's involved in the research. Now, is it safe to say that you have to be or take an interdisciplinary approach when dealing with science fiction? I mean, it's not all just about phasers and space battles and stuff. Which
absolutely
is fun
correct.
Stuff, but,
I was very, very fortunate that a little while ago a conference was held at McMaster University in my honor when they received my papers, and this is the poster for that, where it says science fiction, the interdisciplinary genre. So that absolutely is my mantra, that science fiction, I like to say that it's the literature of intriguing juxtapositions. It's the genre in which two or more things that normally wouldn't come together at all get banged together, and you find the sparks that fly from it. The novel that I was lucky enough to win the Hugo for, Hominids, is paleoanthropology butting against quantum physics. Where else are you going to find those two disciplines? They're not even on the same section, in the library. But in science fiction, the interdisciplinary nature is where you find something to say that's fresh and exciting.
Yeah, so it sounds like you have to have a broad base of knowledge just to even consider being like a serious.
You have to have a voracious appetite for knowledge. After writing 23 books, I know an awful lot about an awful lot of things, but I am a science generalist. I dig in, I write a book. It takes a year to write a book. I can't say that I've, got ADD or anything, but I have a reasonably short attention span. Being a science fiction writer is like being a grad student who gets to change his or her thesis topic at
you're kind of pausing there.
Next week, I'm a quantum physicist. Week after that, I'm an experimental psychologist. Week after that, I'm an interstellar engineer. Week after that, I'm a geneticist.
Okay,
it's astonishing.
We kind of lost you there, Robert.
All right.
Oh, okay, yeah, you're coming back now. So
here I am. Oh my God, freeze frame. I have no idea why we're having these difficulties, but here I am.
Okay.
Ask a question, Justin.
Okay. Yeah, no, I can certainly relate. Like, I'm by profession, I'm a librarian myself, and as you know, librarians, like, we're known for our voracious research and our interests in of professional necessity to be knowledgeable in a broad variety of fields. But I guess that's kind of ties in with my interest in science fiction as well, because both are interdisciplinary in nature and stuff. But what advice would you? Any other advice you could give to anyone? Say, like, I want to I want to go and create my dream science fiction novel or fantasy novel.
Sure. Now, have you lost the video of me?
No.
No, okay, because the online client is saying I've only got audio here. But okay, if you can see me, that's good. All right.
I can see it, yeah.
So the first thing is, because everybody who thinks they're writing their first novel, they always want to know if their idea is new. Somebody just wrote to me last week before, saying I wanted to write a novel about a tidally locked world, right? Our moon is tidally locked. It always faces the same face towards Earth, right? And He wanted to do a book about a tidally locked world. And in starting his research, he discovered that, lo and behold, I had done one. And indeed I had. Farseer here is set. There's a Jovian planet, and it's about a race of intelligent dinosaurs on a tidally locked world that faces a Jovian planet. So he came up with my name, and he wanted to know, have I got a fresh idea here? And I had to say to him, no, Niven did it, and 3 or 4 other guys did the particular thing you're thinking of doing. Hal Clement did it. But so what? It doesn't matter. It's not about having a wholly new premise that has never occurred to anybody in the history of the human race. It's about your fresh take on the material. And from that point of view, I always say, don't worry about how fresh or exciting your idea is. Worry about executing it with your own personal stamp on it, right? Make it yours. Make it your exploration of the dawn of artificial intelligence, right? William Gibson wrote Neuromancer. I wrote Wake. They're completely different novels. Bill's obviously sold a lot better than mine, but they're completely different takes on the same material. Nobody would look at, mine or any number of other things, The Terminator, that are about nascent AI and so forth, and say, oh, James Cameron did The Terminator. Sorry, Bill Gibson. Oh, Rob Sawyer did Wake. Sorry, whoever's coming up behind me. Take whatever you want to write about and find your take on the material.
Okay, that actually brings up another question I had. I do have a story that I have actually been working on for a while, on and off for a couple of years now. I had approached a couple of sci-fi writers who were going to remain anonymous, and some of them are a little reluctant to share ideas, maybe because they're afraid that their ideas might be taken or whatnot. Like, do you find that that's a general attitude within the community, or?
Every beginning writer thinks that their story idea, that in the end it turns out to be Adam and Eve, or it was Earth all along, or he was really a robot, or she was really an alien, is unique and exciting and fresh, and they're the first person to ever think of it. And every science fiction writer at the beginning of their career basically comes up with the same half dozen ideas that Rod Serling did on Twilight Zone, and they've been done by a million other authors. And they're all paranoid. Oh my God, you're going to steal my idea that it was Earth all along, he says, pointing over here to the sculpture behind him as a
I recognize them, yeah.
No, right? They're not. That's not. Your idea is probably not fresh. So what? And nobody is going to steal it. I got a million ideas of my own. You got a million ideas of your own. We're not in the business of pirating other people's notions. We're just in the business of trying to carve out enough time in our lives to write all the ideas we've already had ourselves.
Okay.
But yeah, that paranoia is everywhere, beginning writers, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I found that especially with some Hollywood writers. Like I know, there was another a close friend of mine who was, and when he was in the industry, he wouldn't to give his ideas to anyone just out of just sheer fear. I guess maybe when you start to get into writing in that specific industry, like for television and movie, maybe there is some justification. I don't know. I've never been involved. That one, I consider myself an amateur writer. Maybe at best, it's.
I mean, there's no question that people in Hollywood read books and take ideas from them all the time, and they steal from other film writers and all the time. It happens all the time. But how many of the great things, like right now, The Force Awakens is the biggest film in the history of cinema in terms of box office.
Yep.
So what one idea was in there that was so jealously guarded? None. It's just a mishmash and a rehash of decades-old stuff. Star Wars, when it came out in '77, was just a mishmash and rehash of stuff from the 1920s and 30s. E. Doc Smith in print. The works that make money, very, very few of them are things where somebody could steal the idea, because they aren't a single idea. They're a salad, a stew, a smorgasbord of 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 ideas. And one or another is not going to make or break it. When you have something, where it only is a punchline like I See Dead People, right?
Yeah.
You can only watch that film once, right? Those aren't things that have legs. The things that have legs are the ones where even where there is maybe a trick ending, I'm pointing at my friend the lawgiver here, it's still bears watching again and again and again because there's character, there's drama, there's conflict, there's thematic depth, there's satire, there's something to be said. And that's not something that anybody can steal from you. It's something that somebody else built very carefully, brick by brick, in months or years of work writing a piece.
Yeah, so I guess you could say like all literature in general, not just science fiction, is really just you borrowing off or expanding or taking of different ideas and stuff, and it just kind of weaves together into a fabric. Yeah.
We stand on the shoulders of giants. I stand on the shoulders of Arthur C. Clarke, my favorite science fiction writer, of Isaac Asimov, of Heinlein, of Larry Niven, the masters of hard science fiction. I couldn't do what I'm doing if they hadn't done what they had done first. And there are a fresh crop of writers coming out now who may or may not have read my work or the work of my contemporaries, may have read Robert Charles Wilson, Alan Steele, Jack McDevitt, Julie Trineda, Nalo Hopkinson, any number of writers who are kind of my generation. There's a generation beyond us. And they stand on our shoulders. And it's an infinite progression up to the ceiling of people building on top. And there's no question that the best science fiction ever written is being written today. Everybody knows that the best television ever been written is being written today. The best movies ever made are being made today. There's a lot of crap. There's a lot of schlock. Yes, you can point to garbage anywhere at any time. But the best of the best is always the most recent because it's standing on the highest succession of giants' shoulders.
Yeah, that's a very good. That's a very interesting way to look at it, and it's very true. Just before we close off, can you give us any kind of hints or teasers about your work that's coming out in March?
Yes, my 23rd novel, Quantum Night, is coming out in March. I used to be, I'm going to step briefly into the darkness here because I got to turn on a light. I used to be a novel a year man, and I had the sad tragedy of losing my younger brother and took some time off because of that.
I'm sorry.
I'm all set for the book tour. Here is the poster for Quantum Night, which comes out on March 1st. And it is a novel about a quantum physicist and an experimental psychologist at the University of Manitoba who are trying to figure out exactly why it is that some people seem to have no inner lives and others who do seem to have no conscience. They're essentially psychopaths running around in far greater profusion than most people have ever thought that there might be. And this is, again, those things juxtaposed, right? The sparks off of things that you might not expect. A quantum physicist and an experimental psychologist wrestling with the fundamental question of whether or not you can change human nature. And comes out on March 1st, which is about a month from now as we're talking. And my editor, for what it's worth, my Canadian editor, Adrian Kerr, thinks it's the best book I've ever written. I certainly think it's the most ambitious book, probably, that I've ever written. And I hope people enjoy it. Quantum Night, N-I-G-H-T, coming from Ace Science Fiction in the States and Penguin, Canada's Viking imprint in Canada.
Okay, well, listen, I will certainly look forward to reading your novel, and I will, first of all, I want to thank you again for joining us tonight and sharing your insights. I certainly found it very educational. I hope all our listeners did as well, and hopefully we can bring you on again as a guest in the near future. So,
absolutely, my pleasure.
Okay.
Live long and prosper. Be well.
Okay.
And thank you for having me.
You're welcome,
Cheers.
and may the force be with you. Okay, thank you.
That too.
All right. All right, thank you for tuning in, everyone. Good night.